This is a work of fiction depicting what may have resulted from a real-life terrorist plot from the 1990s. This plot was disrupted by an accidental fire while the terrorists were building bombs. They were caught by Philippine police in early January of 1995, only a couple of weeks before the plot was to begin. What you are about to hear is a continuous radio news broadcast covering the events of the BOJINKA plot, an early conceptual predecessor to what we now know as 9/11.
That was a sample from Symphony No. 1 of Jean Sibelius as directed by Sir Alexander Gibson, the founder and former music director of the Scottish Opera Company. Gibson died today of complications after a heart attack. He was 68. He founded the Scottish Opera in 1962 and was its music director until 1987, when he became conductor laureate. Gibson appeared regularly as guest conductor with symphony orchestras worldwide and was the principal guest conductor with the Houston Symphony Orchestra from 1981 to 1983. The U.S. and Mexican governments said yesterday that Mexico was ready to use its oil revenues to underwrite U.S. loan guarantees that Wall Street has been seeking to justify keeping money in Mexico. The plan, backed by Bill Clinton and key members of Congress, could make available to Mexico as much as $40 billion in commercial credit. A new study hints at potential lung danger in cigarette filters. The filters that reduced tar inhaled from cigarettes may themselves be dangerous when tiny fibers are inhaled and lodge in the lungs of smokers, a new study suggests. The study, to be published on Sunday in the Journal of Cancer Research, does not...
I'm sorry to cut you off, Carol, but we do have some breaking news which has just come across our news wire. This developing story is brought to us by police sources in the Philippines, who've just confirmed to local media that an explosion took place in Luneta Park, which is located in the capital, Manila. Luneta Park, as we've known over recent days, is the site at which we understand that a closing mass was being held today for World Youth Day, a biannual youth outreach festival organized by the Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II, of course, presided over the Mass, which initial reports say had just concluded when the blast occurred. We have no word at this time as to the condition of Pope John Paul II, nor do we know the cause of the explosion. However, police sources have apparently declared the incident a mass casualty event.
Thanks for that breaking news update, David. And we're getting more details now on the apparent explosion at a Catholic Mass in the Philippines, at which Pope John Paul II was in attendance. Witnesses to the incident say that the explosion was strong and powerful, knocking some Mass attendees off their feet a considerable distance away. One young Massgoer said that the Pope was walking down a street and shaking hands with people when the blast occurred, and the blast did indeed occur within the crowd. This witness, whose name we are keeping confidential due to his young age, says he did not see the Pope afterwards due to a thick cloud of white smoke which obscured his view. It is not clear at this time whether the Pope was near the explosion or if he was harmed.
We do have another witness to the explosion on the phone with us now. His name is Manuel Cervantes, and he claims to have had a clear and elevated view from a nearby platform when the explosion took place. Hello, Manuel. Are you there?
Yes, hello. I am here.
You're on the air on Radio 660. This is David Shepard with World News Tonight. Now, Manuel, How are you doing?
I'm a little shaken up, but I'm okay. I'm not injured. A lot of people are, though.
Yes, we do understand from our sources that there have been many casualties. Could you describe for us, please, what exactly happened? Could you tell what caused the explosion?
I'm not sure, David. I don't know what caused it. I just know I was watching the Pope walk down the street, and he was shaking hands and greeting people, and all of a sudden there was a loud bang and a big orange fireball. It was very sharp and a loud bang, a loud crack, like thunder. There were people screaming all over. Children were crying. It's World Youth Day today, so it's all families. Oh God, I hope none of them were hurt. It was such a powerful explosion.
Manuel, hi. This is Carol Stanley with World News Tonight. Are you aware of how close the Pope was to this explosion? Do you know if he was caught up in this?
I don't want to say without knowing for sure, but the explosion fireball blocked my view of the Pope, and I did not see him afterwards. Police were quick to remove us from the area. I don't want to say for certain, but I am very worried for John Paul, and I hope that if he is injured, that God will be by his side.
Indeed. We do hope that the Pope is all right. It was around 14 years ago now, in 1981, that there was an attempt to assassinate Pope John Paul II. The Pope at that time suffered 2 gunshots and ultimately survived. The attempt was linked to a Turkish fascist group. David, what do you think we can make of the fact that this was an explosion? Do you think there's any chance that this may not be some kind of attack against the Pope?
That's a good point, Carol. This Pope has already survived one attempt for his life. So that, of course, raises the fears of somebody, well, trying again. That being said, with the explosion occurring along a street, as we understand, it is possible that it may have been the result of a gas main rupturing. Maybe. I do have to say, though, the timing around the end of the closing Mass on Sunday for what has been a multi-day event does, at least in my opinion, make the potential for this being anything but a deliberate and targeted attack very, very slim.
Manuel, can you see or hear anything from where you are now? What's going on currently?
I'm in a hotel lobby near Lueta Park, where the explosion happened. There are lots of other people here who were at the Mass. The police moved us here after it happened. People are confused, and lots of people are crying. There isn't any news here yet, but I can hear people saying that they saw dead people. Lots of people are crying.
Oh wow. Were you able to see anything yourself before the police made you move?
I saw lots of smoke, and I saw the street covered in litter and debris. I think I could see a priest lying in the road, but I'm not sure if he was alive or not. I did not really have time to process what I was seeing before the police very quickly told us to move across the street to this hotel.
I'm sorry you had to see that. That certainly sounds like a horrific sight. This is Radio 660, and we are on the phone with Manuel Cervantes, an eyewitness to an explosion which interrupted a Catholic Mass where Pope John Paul II was in attendance. Manuel, thank you for your time, and please stay safe.
Thank you, Carol. I'm hoping that this situation is not as bad as it seems.
We are continuing to receive some unfortunate details of the tragedy in Manila involving Pope John Paul II. Philippine medical authorities are saying now that they have counted 5 dead amid the casualties of the explosion, with a further 10 or so being transported to area hospitals with various injuries. There's still no word as to the condition of Pope John Paul II, or indeed as to whether he was even affected by what witnesses describe as being a rather powerful blast. The World Youth Day Festival, which has lasted since Tuesday in Manila, has drawn staggering crowds, numbering in the multiple millions, with over 5 million people believed to have been attending the closing Mass. Most of these attendees are, as the event name implies, young people which the Catholic Church says are mostly in the age range of 16 to 35. The event serves as a sort of pilgrimage for Catholic youth, in which the Church hopes to enlighten a new generation of Catholics and educate them on their future role in the Church. Now, the blast, we are told, occurred at 10:48 a.m. local time in Manila, which is 10:48 at night here in the eastern United States, Manila being 12 hours ahead. The time is now 10:59, around 11 minutes post-explosion. This is World News Tonight on Radio 660, where we are providing continuing coverage of this breaking tragedy in the Philippines. It is coming up on the top of the hour now, which would normally be the end of our nightly broadcast. However, Carol and I will continue to follow this developing story for you. We have the studio feeding us each information from different sources in Manila. I will be providing you updates related to casualties and the condition of Pope John Paul II, while Carol will be giving you information from the local police there in the Philippines. Now, Carol, do we have anything new in the law enforcement angle of this story?
I've been made aware just a moment ago that police are investigating this incident as an act of terrorism. Firefighters were in fact called to the scene due to the possibility that, like you said, it could have been a gas main rupture. However, firefighters took gas readings in the area and found no such signs of any potential gas-related explosion. The police in the Philippines, meanwhile, say that their reason for believing this event to be linked to terrorism may be related to an ongoing investigation which they were apparently made aware of a couple weeks ago. The exact details of that prior investigation have not been shared, and no suspects have been named as of present. However, police are saying they believe an international terrorist group to be behind this. The event is now being reported in the Philippines as a bombing, after police say they found evidence of shrapnel such as nails and ball bearings at the crime scene. A spokesman for Philippine President Fidel Ramos says that President Ramos is aware of the events and is monitoring developments closely. President Ramos is scheduled to address the nation and the international community regarding this horrific act of terror at noon local time, which is just under an hour from now. In the meantime, that spokesman for the administration says that the president will remain in close contact with officials from the Catholic Church and that the Catholic Church will be kept in the loop regarding the investigation. It is unknown at this time what type of role, if any, Vatican authorities might take as this terror bombing is investigated.
The first victim of this apparent bombing has been identified, according to Vatican officials, who confirmed the identity to medical personnel. John Beck Hampton of the United Kingdom was a priest who served his community of Wakefield, England, ever since the early 1970s. The priest of more than 20 years was a father of two teenage sons who we are told were in attendance at this year's World Youth Day. There is no word on either of Father Hampton's sons. In other developments, medical authorities across several local hospitals are counting the injured at more than 30 now, as ambulances arrived with the critically wounded. Doctors report that numerous people have been prepared for surgeries, which may include limb amputations and bone resetting. The injuries being described by medical staff are gruesome and horrible. And I will spare you listeners the grisly details, which unfortunately I have been hearing. Paramedics say that many people are so badly injured that they cannot move from the scene on their own. And unfortunately, the city of Manila is running thin on ambulances, as nearly all of them are active in response to this tragedy. Paramedics are driving back and forth from the bombing site to local hospitals, where the wounded are offloaded on stretchers and simply left at the front doors to the emergency department so that the ambulance crews can rush back to the scene to pick up more victims. Casualty figures are expected to rise, perhaps even in dramatic fashion, as the wounded from this senseless act of violence are slowly tallied.
We're getting unconfirmed reports now from an associate of one of our sources in Manila. We have a source on the ground in Manila currently who has informed us that a colleague of his was detained by police while attempting to get near to the crime scene with a camera. Police allegedly told the journalist that no photos were allowed to be taken of the crime scene, and he was apparently detained for a verbal argument which he engaged in with police. Our source also tells us his colleague's camera was broken during the arrest. However, it is unclear if that was an intentional or accidental act on part of the police. It is not known by our source on the ground why the crime scene would be treated with such secrecy. There have been no photos released since the bombing, and we are allowed to say that we are complying with the press embargo by the Vatican government to not publish any photos which are released. However, again, no photos exist that we know of. We'll go now to our Vatican correspondent, Father Rubio FERACO, who has worked alongside the Vatican for more than 15 years and has been a journalist for the past 9. Father Rubio, what are we to make of this shroud of secrecy from the Vatican and Philippine authorities regarding the bombing in Manila?
Well, it certainly doesn't strike me as a positive sign. I do not want to speculate into dark territory at this moment. However, today is a day which is clearly going to push our comfort limits. I can tell you, having been a part of the Catholic Church and having worked alongside the Vatican's administration for a while, in my observation, the Church tends to like to respond to tragedy on its own time, when it can get its affairs in order, so as to maintain a semblance of stability within the ranks during times of dire stress.
It sounds to me like you're saying that you're anticipating bad news from this event. Is that right? What sort of contingencies does the Catholic Church have in place for such a tragedy?
Well, to be frank, the Church will observe 9 days of mourning, and then after 15 days, the electoral process begins in the College of Cardinals. They'll meet daily in the Sistine Chapel until they reach a 2/3 majority, and then the decision will be announced with the release of white smoke from the chapel.
It sounds like you're expecting this news to be very bad then. We certainly hope that isn't the case. Why do you think it might be? Is this a gut feeling you have, or is this based on some kind of knowledge?
It's based on my experience with the Church and how it responds to death. When you brought me on the air, I was going to talk about how when John Paul was shot years ago, we didn't fully know his status until hours later, until after he had completed surgery. But then you brought me on the air and mentioned a journalist arrest and a press embargo, and I frankly cannot see any other reason why they would be responding so forcefully if everything was going to be okay.
So, you think John Paul II is dead?
I think the Vatican is taking their time to figure out how to announce some serious news, whatever that may be. And we will have to wait until the Church is ready to address this disaster on their own terms. They certainly don't want anything leaking to the media before they themselves are ready to tell us.
Father Rubio, ladies and gentlemen. If you are just tuning in, I'm Carol Stanley, and I'm here with David Shepard, and we are continuing to cover a developing story from Manila in the Philippines, where it would appear that some sort of terrorist bombing has targeted Pope John Paul II during a closing mass for a youth event. David, are we hearing anything new about the casualties?
We have received updated numbers, yes, and they are shocking in the amount by which they have risen since my last update. The injured now number more than 50, this coming as medical officials at 4 hospitals across the area have confirmed a total of 12 deaths, of which at least 4 are thought to be children. These come alongside 2 priests, Father John Hampton of England, who I mentioned earlier, as well as Father Zheng Yang of Taiwan. These death confirmations are not a comforting sign for those watching for any news on Pope John Paul II, which we still have not received, as these priests were last seen prior to the blast not far ahead of the Pope's position on the street.
I'm being told now that U.S. President Bill Clinton has been briefed on the bombing in Manila, and he is following the developments closely and receiving regular updates from authorities in the Philippines. The White House Communications Director confirmed just a short moment ago that President Clinton will give a nationwide address from Camp David, where he is currently on retreat, regarding the horrific attack in Manila. President Clinton will deliver his remarks around half-hour past midnight on the East Coast, thereby directly following the remarks to be delivered by Philippine President Fidel Ramos at noon, Manila local time. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, as smoke still lingers over Luneta Park, where a dozen have been confirmed dead, police say that the attack is now being classified as a suicide bombing. This development comes after Philippine police discovered the remains of a badly burned body of a young Middle Eastern male wearing priest robes. It is now believed by police that the suicide bomber disguised himself as a Catholic priest in order to get close to the Pope, and then he detonated a suicide belt once the Pope came to shake his hand. Multiple units of the Philippine National Police are reporting directly to President Ramos as the investigation widens. Groups tasked with criminal investigation, civil security, intelligence, firearms and explosives, and even aviation security groups have been brought in to this ever-deepening investigation into a crime whose true scope we are still unaware. It is unclear why aviation security groups have been brought in on the task force. However, local media speculation is that they intend to secure the safe transit of Vatican officials, including the Pope if he is indeed alive, out of the country at the earliest opportunity.
At long last, now 21 minutes after the bombing, we do finally have a couple of sketchy details regarding Pope John Paul II. Now, according to paramedics, the Pope was transported to a local hospital. They are not saying which one for security reasons, nor has there been any word given by hospital staff regarding the condition of the Pope upon his arrival to the medical center. All we appear to know at this time is that the Pope is indeed at a hospital. However, his condition remains unknown. Now, President Fidel Ramos has left the presidential palace to meet with officials of the Vatican. Ramos was spotted by reporters as he left the palace, and his appearance and demeanor appeared serious and somber, as he walked with a vigor that indicates the intense emotion he must have been feeling in that moment. The local media is speculating that President Ramos may go to visit the Pope in the hospital prior to his nationwide address. Again, it must be stressed that we do not know the Pope's condition as of present, only that he is in a local hospital, and it is speculated that President Ramos may be on his way there to visit as we speak.
The Vatican has announced that an official statement will be delivered from Vatican City in just a few moments here. We have Father Rubio, of course, our Vatican correspondent, who is standing by there for that imminent statement. Do we have Father Rubio back on the line?
Yes, I am here.
Father Rubio, what can we assume from this statement at the Vatican that is about to happen?
Look, I am not going to preempt the Vatican on any statement. However, speculation is running rampant among media outlets from across the world. It's certain that the world's 1.3 billion Catholics are all watching this news with bated breath as we await some kind of official word.
It's my understanding that the Pope is injured and receiving treatment at a local hospital. Now, if that is the case, what exactly do we expect this statement to entail?
If the Pope has been incapacitated but not killed, then it's likely that the statement may be a simple prayer for his recovery and a condemnation of the attack, along with a necessary reminder that such an event would not necessitate a conclave. If this is the case, the College of Cardinals will be tasked with maintaining the status quo until the Pope's condition changes. Only in the event of the Pope's death would a conclave be necessary.
And what may we expect if the news is far more grave than any of us are hoping for? You didn't seem too optimistic when we spoke earlier.
Well, in that case, the Cardinal CAMERLENGO, Nathan Williams, will be the one to announce such a thing. If the statement comes from Cardinal Williams, then we'll know right away what he's about to tell us.
That statement is, in fact, being broadcast from the Vatican now. Let's listen in.
Tremendously sad and dark day for our church. At 10:48 a.m. local time, while greeting crowds in Manila an explosion caused mass suffering in the vicinity of the pontiff. It is not yet known the full extent to which human lives have suffered as a result of this callous act of evil. However, we have suffered a loss this day. Dearest brothers and sisters, our beloved Father John Paul II returned to the house of his father. He was joined by Archbishop Cardinal Henderson of Manila, who was by his side when the explosion took place. Also returned to the Lord are three priests, who are as follows. Father John Beckhampton, age 56, United Kingdom. Father Zane Yang, age 42, Taiwan. Father Juan Rivero, age 49, Argentina. Let us pray in the silent reflection for these souls.
It is now 11:15 at night here in New York. At 11:15 in the morning over in the Philippines. It is just after 5 a.m. at the Vatican, where it was just announced that Pope John Paul II has died. The Holy See has sent out an email to all major media stations detailing the circumstances of the Pope's sudden death. Pope John Paul II was pronounced dead on arrival at Cardinal Santos Medical Center in Manila, following a devastating bombing which has left more than a dozen dead and over 60 injured at last count. The Pope's cause of death was described by doctors as a massive internal trauma from the intense concussion of the blast. This according to the Vatican Press email.
We will be keeping an eye on international reactions. Europe, which is home to some 200 million Catholics, will be waking up to the shocking news of the death of the pontiff over coming hours. The bells at the Sistine Chapel are tolling in remembrance of the slain Pope John Paul II, along with bells at the churches across Rome as well. It is around 8:15 in Los Angeles, where the news of the Pope's death has already brought mourners into churches. We're receiving reports of a candlelight vigil beginning to form at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills, a historic Catholic church, and in fact the oldest church in the area. We're not yet sure how many people have gathered thus far. However, the vigil is certain to grow in size as the night goes on and news of the Pope's death spreads. Meanwhile, from Camp David, President Clinton released a brief statement to the White House press corps in which Clinton has said, quote, "I am shocked and saddened by this violent and senseless act of terror. My prayers are with the Vatican tonight, as well as more than 1 billion Catholics around the world who revere their Pope. John Paul II certainly leaves a tremendous legacy behind him, and he will be dearly missed."
My God, I don't even know where to begin.
I know. It's simply shocking, isn't it?
Well, yes, the Pope of the death of the Pope is indeed very shocking. However, I hate to tell you, but this day of terror has just become even worse. We have a new alert which has just come to us from the United States Federal Aviation Administration. It seems that the FAA has lost contact with 3 Delta Airlines flights, all bound from East Asia to the western United States. We are unsure what exactly has happened at this time. However, the sudden loss of 3 airliners in quick succession over the Pacific Ocean, all 3 of them Delta flights, at that point, statistics alone practically rule out any possibility of a freak accident. When coupled with the dramatic assassination of Pope John Paul II in Manila, these events seem to display a clear pattern of behavior, which is highly indicative of an organized and international-scale terrorist plot. The flight numbers and their origins have not yet been released by the FAA. However, the timeline of their disappearances from the radar was noted in a press release. The first flight lost contact at 8:02 Pacific Time some 14 minutes ago, followed by a second flight which suffered the same fate only a few minutes later at 8:06. The third plane, as we understand, lost contact approximately another 4 minutes later at 8:10. At 8:14 Pacific Time, just a couple minutes ago, the Federal Aviation Administration made the decision to advise all Delta flights arriving to the United States from international origins to land immediately at the nearest possible airport. It is now 11:20 Eastern Time, 8:20 Pacific. Our affiliates in Honolulu have ongoing coverage of these airliner incidents, as one of the flights apparently disintegrated, according to witnesses, just southwest of the Hawaiian island Maui. The United States Coast Guard has deployed helicopters to fly over the apparent crash site in an attempt to locate any possible survivors and to get a glimpse of the wreckage to see if they may be able to determine if it was a bombing. We are going now to our affiliates in Honolulu, whose reporters are in contact with the Coast Guard as the helicopters approach the crash site. Let's listen to what's going on there.
We are in contact presently with the United States Coast Guard. We have Lieutenant Mike Hammond on the line, and Lieutenant Hammond is on board one of the helicopters as they fly out to respond to the apparent crash site. Lieutenant Hammond, are you seeing anything out there?
Charlie, we're about 40 miles west-southwest of Honolulu as of present, and we are nearing the position at which air traffic control lost the radar track of the aircraft. We can confirm at this time that the flight involved is Delta Airlines Flight 260, which originated from Hong Kong, and its destination was Honolulu. Delta 260 was on final descent toward the runway at Honolulu International when its radar track was lost. We're seeing some signs of small debris on the surface of the water now. It appears to be the outer edges of possibly a larger debris field ahead. I'll keep you updated on what exactly we see and what it means.
Are you seeing any indications of survivors? Like, I don't know, maybe one of those inflated rescue rafts?
We're not seeing any large debris pieces yet so far. We're flying further into what appears to be a debris field here, and the wreckage is becoming more densely cluttered. And yet, we're still not seeing very many large pieces. Large pieces are what we'd want to be seeing if there were to be any survivors. Passengers would have needed to be in an intact, or mostly intact portion of the fuselage in order to survive such a violent breakup.
What about people who may have fallen from the plane as it broke up? I mean, could any of those people possibly be alive down there in the water without large wreckage?
No. Hitting the ocean at altitude would be like hitting cement, and that's not even considering the G-forces of the breakup itself. No, we do not anticipate finding survivors without large wreckage pieces. We're shining spotlights down into the water as the sun is setting now. But even still, everything I've seen looks like it can be picked up with a single hand.
I see. Does anything about the nature of this wreckage indicate a possible cause to you?
Given what we know so far, and that this is not the only Delta flight to suddenly disappear from radar like this, I would say that the small pieces of wreckage we are seeing are consistent with what we've seen from other airliner bombings. Detonating a bomb in an airliner at altitude more often than not results in an incredibly violent breakup in midair. And by the time those pieces hit the ground or the water, they've often been torn apart further during their fall. We don't usually see much left of a bombed airliner when the explosive used is particularly strong.
Tell us more about what happens when an airliner is bombed, and how does that compare to what you're seeing?
That's a good question, Charlie. The first thing I'd like to explain is that
We are going to cut away from our affiliates there in Honolulu, who have just seemingly confirmed that there are no survivors aboard what appears to be a bombing of Delta Airline Flight 260, according to the Coast Guard and the FAA. We unfortunately had to interrupt here as we have received an update from aviation authorities who state that they have lost contact with a further 2 airliners bound for the United States. There is another Delta flight involved, and we are told a United flight as well. All airliners involved so far have been full-sized passenger jet aircraft. We do not know the number of souls on board these flights. However, our aviation experts tell us that such airplanes can carry up to around 150 passengers. This makes for 5 flights now, which have apparently been lost by air traffic control on routes over the Pacific Ocean from routes originating in East Asia, the FAA says.
We do not yet have a claim of responsibility from any terror group thus far, according to the U.S. State Department. There are a few suspects which we can only speculate on at this time, these being groups which have been on the FBI's terror group list for years. The usage of a suicide bomb fest against Pope John Paul II in Manila, along with the coordinated mid-air bombings of multiple U.S.-bound jet carriers, are familiar themes to those of us who have been following the rise in recent years of Islamic jihadi attacks. Groups associated with jihad include the Abu Nidal Organization, a pro-Palestinian terror group which hijacked an Egyptian airliner and killed 58 people back in 1985. Hezbollah, a Lebanese organization, famously attacked the U.S. Embassy and the Marine Corps barracks in Beirut around 11 years ago. Given that the attacks began in Manila and grew to include the flights originating from airports in East Asia, it is also possible that a more localized group may be responsible, like, for example, the Moro National Liberation Front of the Philippines. This could also be the work of some other rising players in the terror realm, like Ramzi Youssef, for instance, who was named a wanted fugitive by the FBI for his role in the World Trade Center bombing almost 2 years ago. We may even be looking at possible state actors like dictator of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, who was accused of the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing in 1988.
We are receiving more confirmations from the Federal Aviation Administration regarding which flights have been involved so far. At 8:02 Pacific Time, Delta 142, a Boeing 737 with 155 people on board, from Tokyo to San Francisco, was last spotted on radar in a rapid descent about 900 miles south of Alaska. At 8:04 Pacific Time, Delta 260, a Boeing 757 with 172 on board, exploded mid-air and broke apart while beginning its descent towards its destination in Honolulu, having originated from Hong Kong. At 8:10 Pacific Time, Delta 122, a Boeing 747 with 312 on board, from Seoul to Los Angeles, suddenly vanished from radar approximately 1,000 miles east of Japan. It is unlikely that there are any survivors from any of these flights, believed to have each been bombed as they flew towards their destination in the U.S. Assuming all those on board have perished, as it does seem likely, and we are looking at more than 639 deaths, this not including the 2 other flights which were lost, but on which no details have been released, which I announced earlier. If those airliners can be assumed to be similar models as the ones already involved, we could possibly be looking at anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 fatalities in this wave of terror across the skies over the Pacific. Carol, back to you. What are we hearing in the international response to these disturbing events?
Prime Minister Felipe González of Spain, which is home to a very large population of Catholics, has extended his deepest condolences to the Vatican as the Holy See begins its 9 days of mourning following the Pope's death. President Boris Yeltsin of Russia says that he has been briefed on the spate of bombings against American passenger planes, and according to Yeltsin, Russia, quote, stands with the people of the United States as well as the Vatican in response to these horrific acts of terror. We've still not heard any claim of responsibility. However, there have been plenty of announcements to the contrary as American enemies come out to firmly deny involvement in the attacks. Hezbollah, which I mentioned earlier was responsible for the bombing of a U.S. embassy several years ago, has released a statement to Lebanese media categorically denying any Hezbollah or Lebanese involvement in the attacks against U.S. airliners. The Philippine rebel group, the Moro National Liberation Front, condemns the attack on Pope John Paul II, saying that it is not in the interests of their organization to involve themselves in attacks against religious figures. The MNLF reiterates that its fight is against the Philippine government, not against Catholics or the United States. President Saddam Hussein of Iraq likewise says that it is not involved with any terrorist group which threatened to harm America, instead saying that if Iraq had a problem with the United States, it would, quote, act much more directly. Libyan dictator Colonel Muammar Gaddafi told reporters in Tripoli that he has derived great amusement from the announcement of the Pope's death, but denies that Libya had anything to do with either the bombing in Manila or the airliner bombings in Asia. Libya, which is accused of the Pan Am 103 bombing from several years ago, experienced missile strikes by the Reagan administration in response to that event, which Gaddafi says Libya has little interest in repeating. We're also aware that the United States Federal Aviation Administration is making a public announcement regarding the flight bombings presently. So we'll now cut to that statement, which we understand is coming from FAA spokesman Greg Evans. Here that is.
And we have notified the families of the victims from these flights. We can confirm at this time that the flights involved and the number of souls on board are the following. Delta 142, Tokyo to San Francisco, 155 on board. Delta 260, Hong Kong to Honolulu, 172 on board. Delta 122, Seoul to Los Angeles, 312 on board. United 812, Tokyo to Seattle, 112 on board. Delta 232, Singapore to Honolulu, 202 on board. These are the 5 flights which have been confirmed to the media so far. We do believe this to be an ongoing situation, and we are not convinced it has concluded. As such, the Federal Aviation Administration has ordered the immediate grounding of all American flight carriers who are approaching the United States from international origins. The order was given to ground flights inbound to the U.S. from East Asia just a few minutes ago. And that order was expanded just a moment ago to include all international flights headed for the U.S. We can also confirm that in the case of Delta 142, air traffic controllers received a radio communication from that aircraft in which the co-pilot reported that the aircraft had experienced an explosive decompression as it entered a sharp downward decline. United 812 likewise communicated that some sort of explosion took place at the rear of the aircraft, and this communication suddenly ended as the aircraft broke apart. The FBI has been notified, who have in turn reached out to law enforcement authorities in Japan, South Korea, and Singapore as well to assist in this investigation. The NTSB tells us it has opened its own investigation and has requested from us all data pertaining to these flights. The FAA is fully cooperating with all law enforcement and investigative agencies involved, and we hope to see justice served for what seems to be a massive and coordinated series of deliberate attacks. Media outlets are encouraged to direct their questions to the Federal Aviation Administration via the FAA press office, whose email is pressoffice@faa.gov.
We're cutting away from the FAA now as spokesman Greg Evans concludes his remarks there, and we are going now to Tokyo, where police say they have responded to a large explosion which occurred at Terminal 3 of Haneda Airport Passenger Terminal in Tokyo, Japan. Airport officials elaborated that the explosion occurred on board an aircraft which was parked at either Gate 107A or 107B. They are not sure exactly which gate it was at this time. Medical officials have responded to the terminal where this occurred, where it is said that they do not expect to see many casualties from this event. That's the good news. The bad news is that the airport has confirmed the deaths of 2 cabin crew on the parked passenger jet, as well as 3 ground crew who were nearby when the explosion took place. The blast flew at the windows of the adjacent terminal, and there are several minor glass injuries being reported. However, officials there do say they believe there are only 5 fatalities.
We are following developing news of an exploding passenger plane parked at a terminal at an airport in Japan. 5 were killed, 2 in the aircraft and 3 on the ground, during the explosion which shattered terminal windows and left around 20 people with minor glass-related injuries. The Japan Civil Aviation Bureau is reporting to the media that the aircraft involved was operating as United Flight 886, which was to leave for Tokyo for Honolulu. The aircraft was reportedly a Boeing 737 with more than 100 passengers at the terminal waiting to board. United 886 had apparently been delayed for more than an hour as maintenance crews worked to resolve some sort of mechanical issue with the landing gear of that Boeing 737. We are told the landing gear issue is not believed to be linked to the explosion. Because of that issue, though, a decision was made to delay the boarding process for around the past 70 minutes or so. Because of this, no passengers were on board the aircraft at the time of the explosion, as they were all waiting at the nearby terminal. While the death toll in tonight's spree of aircraft bombings is believed to have topped over 900, it could have been over 1,000 if not for the delay of United 886. This is perhaps the closest thing to good news we expect to receive tonight, as this wave of terror has only appeared to grow in scale and severity. We're going back to the FAA now, where we understand that spokesman Greg Evans, who just concluded public remarks a couple minutes ago, has returned to address the media once again. Back to FAA spokesman Greg Evans.
Additional flights. We at the FAA will only release the flight numbers once the passengers' families have been notified. However, I can tell you the airlines involved and the routes which they were flying. A United flight from Taipei to San Francisco lost radar contact suddenly at 6:23 Hawaii time about 10 minutes ago. A United flight from Honolulu to Los Angeles lost radar contact after a sudden drop in altitude at 6:25 Hawaii time. That's 8:25 Pacific. Air traffic controllers have notified the FAA that they are presently in contact with another flight, a Delta flight en route from Manila to Los Angeles, which reported to controllers an explosive event at 6:27 Hawaii time. The aircraft is still airborne as we understand. Controllers are in contact with the air crew, and arrangements have been made for that flight to make an emergency landing in Guam. For those keeping track, this now makes for 8 aircraft incidents which occurred in rapid-fire succession, with only 8 minutes at most between reported incidents. Federal law enforcement officials are involved with this ongoing situation, and the FAA is maintaining steady contact with the FBI as we respond to these events.
Excuse me, Mr. Evans. I'm with the Associated Press. Does the number of incidents you said include the explosion in Japan with a passenger plane there?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm not aware of an explosion in Japan.
Several stations are reporting that a 737 exploded at an airport gate in Tokyo. Do you have any comment on that incident?
I'm not sure. Again, I was unaware of an incident in Tokyo. A 737, you said? I don't know. Maybe it's 9? Then, at this moment, I would like to say that any further questions, again, should be directed to the FAA press office at pressoffice@faa.gov.
And there you have it, folks. We just heard from FAA spokesman Greg Evans again, who confirmed another 3 flights which have apparently been bombed. The death toll already confirmed at over 900 just from the first 5 flights. It is almost certain that we are looking at over 1,000 dead tonight in the Pacific skies. The ocean is almost surely littered with the airplane debris, as at least 7 of those flights are believed to have exploded outright and broken apart in the air. Another aircraft exploded at an airport terminal in Tokyo, Japan, with 5 deaths reported from that event. Fortunately, the passengers were inside the terminal when the plane exploded, the flight having been significantly delayed due to an unrelated mechanical issue. Air traffic controllers, meanwhile, have apparently informed the FAA that they are in contact with yet another flight which suffered what the FAA calls an explosive event. That flight, a Delta flight bound for LA, is presently making its way toward Guam for an emergency landing. Certainly our thoughts are with the passengers on board that aircraft as they grapple through what has to be a harrowing ordeal. In case you missed it, we are now gathering details of up to 9 passenger planes which have seemingly all experienced explosions on board, 8 of them happening during flight, with one of those on its way to Guam presently to make an emergency landing. Carol, it's been about half an hour since the string of airline bombings began. Are we hearing any details from law enforcement anywhere? Surely there must be investigations underway in several countries by now, yes?
That's right, David. We are hearing some details over the past minute or so from Philippine authorities regarding what knowledge they may have in relation to these airliner attacks. The Philippine National Police say that these airliner bombings may be linked to last month's partially failed bombing of Philippine Airlines Flight 434. That incident, which occurred this past December, killed 1 person aboard that flight before the pilots managed to make an emergency landing with the damaged aircraft. They now believe that the bombing aboard Flight 434 last month may have been some sort of test run for the attacks which we've seen unfold tonight. As for their investigation, the Philippine National Police and Philippine Department of Justice do have a suspect in all of these airliner events, including the one from last month, and they just announced that they have issued an arrest warrant. The arrest warrant is for 27-year-old Kuwaiti-born jihadi Ramzi Yosef. If that name sounds familiar to you, that is because the FBI named Yosef as their prime suspect for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which occurred almost 2 years ago now. The FBI is in contact with the Philippine National Police, with the latter saying they are open to sharing with American authorities any and all information which they possess on Mr. Yosef.
Folks, if you are just now tuning into our station, you may be confused to be hearing news at this hour rather than the soft rock which Radio 660 usually plays at night. This extended news coverage pertains to an ongoing series of carefully coordinated terrorist attacks which have all occurred within the past hour. This unforgettable day of terror began at 10:48, which was the time at night here in New York, and the time in the morning over in the Philippines where this all began. At that moment, an explosion rocked the closing mass of the World Youth Day event in Manila, where Pope John Paul II was in attendance and was seen greeting crowds prior to the blast. The Vatican later announced that Pope John Paul II has in fact died as a result of that attack. Around 14 minutes after the explosion in Manila, another explosion occurred aboard a Trans-Pacific Delta Airlines flight, killing everyone on board. That same thing would repeat with at least 6 other Delta and United flights over the course of the next half hour. Additionally, we understand that a United plane exploded on the tarmac at the International Airport in Tokyo, killing 5 cabin and ground crew. No passengers were aboard that aircraft, which has been perhaps the only silver lining we have encountered in the news thus far. The FAA says that a 9th airliner has suffered an explosion, likely a partially failed version of the bombs we saw aboard the other flights. which blew a hole in the fuselage and resulted in 2 passenger deaths. The crew is fighting to maintain control of that aircraft as we speak in order to direct it to an emergency landing in Guam. The FBI's Guam office is reportedly waiting at the airport for that flight's arrival, where presumably an investigation will commence immediately. Again, if you are just tuning in, 10 explosions, 1 at a Catholic event in the Philippines, and 9 aboard various U.S. airliners have killed an untold number of people, including Pope John Paul II. This is, almost certainly without a doubt, the deadliest terrorist act in modern times, perhaps even in history. Really, I'd say that only in the modern world has the capacity for this much death in such quick succession been so disturbingly easy to accomplish. It is around 15 minutes till midnight now here on the East Coast. January 14th, 1995. A date which will certainly not be forgotten by many anytime soon. You're listening to World News Tonight on Radio 660. I'm David Shepard, and I'm here with Carol Stanley as we continue to cover these horrific and tragic events.
It's 10 now.
I'm sorry?
A 10th flight was lost by air traffic controllers in Japan about 20 minutes after the takeoff of another Delta Airlines flight from Tokyo. Details are sketchy at the moment. However, the Japanese Coast Guard and the U.S. Air Force are scrambling aircraft to fly over the area and confirm whether a crash has occurred.
I would hope that you're joking. However, this has clearly not been a night for humor, unfortunately. What more can you tell us, Carol?
At this moment, there is no further information regarding this apparent 10th flight. We've established contact with our own source at the FAA, who has reported to us that the aviation authorities have grounded all flights which were scheduled to take off from Hawaii. This comes after the bombing of one of these flights in particular, a Honolulu to Los Angeles flight, which has apparently raised concerns about the possibility for further bombings originating from U.S. airports. All the other flights have come from international destinations, and so the bombing of a flight from Honolulu stands out. The FBI, meanwhile, has reportedly been mobilized to the Honolulu International Airport, where they are allegedly boarding and inspecting all flights which are landing there. Now, we can understand the measure to ground takeoffs from Hawaii. However, it remains unclear at this time why the FBI is taking an interest in flights coming into Hawaii. What is known at this moment is what we are hearing from passengers aboard one recently landed flight at Honolulu, who claims that the FBI boarded their plane at the gate and informed all passengers that they would be detained on the aircraft while the aircraft is searched. On the phone with us now is one of those passengers, Heather CRAVEN, who is aboard United Airlines Flight 872. Heather, can you hear me? What happened when your plane landed?
Hi, Carol. Yes, I can hear you. When the plane landed and turned off the runway, it was almost immediately that the captain announced that we would not be heading to our gate, but that we were instead going to stop on the tarmac. Mind you, we didn't even know what was going on, because we were just on a 9-hour flight from Hong Kong, so we had no idea why we weren't going to our gate. Then we suddenly stopped in the middle of a taxiway. There are no other planes around that we can see, and there's a ton of black cars and SUVs parked around our plane. The captain came back and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it would appear we have been involved in a law enforcement investigation, and the aircraft will now be boarded and searched. Please cooperate with authorities." Some guy in a suit boards the plane and he stands at the front of the aisle and shows a badge and says that he's with the FBI and there's an ongoing terror investigation. Then he says, "Nobody move. Everybody stay in your seats. You are all considered to be detained on this aircraft until we finish our search." Next thing I know, there's these guys in blue jackets that say FBI on them, and they're walking down the aisles and they're removing luggage from the overhead compartments and pulling them out and opening them up and looking through them. All this happening right in the middle of the aisles. There must have been like 20 agents on our plane. Then they brought in what I must assume are bomb-sniffing dogs, and they're sniffing around under seats and everything, and everyone on the plane was just frozen in confusion and fear over what was going on. This lasted for about 20 to 25 minutes before they finally let us all off the plane and told us there was no problem that they could find.
Heather, you say you were unaware of the recent terror attacks when you landed. When did you become aware of what was happening?
It wasn't until I got into the airport after the FBI let us go. Then once I got into the terminal, it was all over the news, on all the TVs here. Everyone in the airport is talking about it, and all the flights out of here are cancelled. I was on my way home to California after a vacation with my husband in Hong Kong, but it doesn't seem like we'll be getting home anytime soon.
Yes, we've heard from a source in the FAA over the past couple minutes that all flights from Hawaii have been grounded and all international flights to the United States have been told to land immediately at their nearest airport. We hope this airspace closure doesn't last long and that you can get home safely soon enough. Heather, thanks for joining us. We're going to go now to our next call, where we have online our counterterrorism expert, Hallie Lewis. Lewis worked with British MI6 for more than 10 years, over which time she was involved in multiple terrorism investigations in both the United Kingdom as well as the United States. Hallie, what do you make of these recent developments?
Well, you mentioned Ramzi Youssef earlier, who Philippine authorities have apparently issued an arrest warrant for. This is notable to me because, as you mentioned, this isn't the first time I'm hearing that name in connection with large-scale terrorist plots. Youssef was a prime suspect for the World Trade Center bombing about 2 years ago, which killed 6 people, but his intentions were far greater. Youssef intended to collapse the one tower into the other, causing potentially several thousand casualties. Now it would appear that he may have found another way to cause thousands of casualties by bombing multiple airliners instead. It's my opinion, at least, that if Ramzi Youssef was indeed involved in these attacks, then he almost certainly was not the mastermind. He may have been the ringleader, but it is my belief that there are bigger figures in play here tonight who had to not only plan but also finance and execute these attacks.
Do you have any suspicions as to who the mastermind may be, if not Mr. Youssef?
Well, there comes the matter of financing these attacks, because acquiring the materials for 11 powerful bombs as well as tickets for long-haul international flights does not come without a significant cost. Whoever was behind this was dedicated to causing as much harm as possible, seemingly without any regard for the expense of such an operation. And quite frankly, there's only one name that's coming to mind when I ponder the question of who has the resources and connections to pull off something of this scale. And that, in my mind, would most likely be Osama bin Laden.
Now, that isn't the first time we're hearing that name either, but I'm coming up blank on who he was. Can you remind myself and our listeners, please? Who is Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden originally came to Western attention in the 1980s during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, in which bin Laden was a so-called freedom fighter of the Mujahideen, the Afghan resistance group against the Soviet invasion. Western governments funded and equipped the Mujahideen, including bin Laden, to fight the Soviets. Sometime around the end of the Cold War, however, Osama bin Laden's alliance of opportunity of the West had seemingly shifted, and bin Laden's incendiary rhetoric towards the West intensified. Osama bin Laden has since supported various terrorist endeavors over recent years, landing him a spot on terror watch lists across the globe. Some listeners may know the bin Laden name from the construction industry, where his father Mohammed bin Laden formed the Saudi bin Laden Group, which has since become a multi-million-dollar company with construction contracts around the world. Osama, one of the many heirs to the bin Laden family fortune, was essentially born rich, and he grew up in a lavish upbringing, something which is not typical of jihadi terrorists. This makes Osama bin Laden a formidable opponent to Western interests in the Middle East. If you're not familiar with the name Osama bin Laden, you're going to want to memorize that name tonight, because if he was involved in this, that is a man who will shape American foreign policy for years to come in the wake of these attacks.
Hallie Lewis, everybody. Hallie, thank you for joining us. David, back to you.
It is now around an hour since this all began in Manila, with the shocking assassination of Pope John Paul II. Around 15 minutes after the explosion in Manila, a night of terror began over the Pacific Ocean, in Hawaii, and also in Japan. 10 planes, all U.S. carriers, exploded in rapid succession over the course of about 30 minutes. No greater than 8 minutes passed between the bombings of each airliner, we are told, with most of the downings happening within less than 5 minutes of each other. The staggering death toll from these attacks could be as high as 2,000, but the exact figures are still unknown as we gather more information regarding the specific number of passengers aboard each plane. This has been, without a doubt, the deadliest day in aviation history, and also likely the most carefully planned and coordinated series of calculated terrorist attacks we have ever seen. It is almost midnight now, on January 14th of 1995, a date which will undoubtedly live in infamy, as President Roosevelt notably said after Pearl Harbor. And that is, unfortunately, an appropriate comparison. This is the largest foreign attack against Americans since the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which brought the United States into World War II. These attacks, however, came during what has been described as a great peacetime in modern history. We just observed 3 years since the breakup of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, and I think, frankly, we as Americans have let our guard down. Terrorists have unfortunately taken advantage of that fact tonight, launching a devastating series of attacks which will surely have worldwide repercussions for perhaps a very, very long time to come. It is unimaginable at this stage what kind of effect this may have on the American psyche, our collective way of looking at the world, as the great peacetime has just been shattered tonight in a horrific act of terror. I'm David Shepard. I'm here with my co-host Carol Stanley, and this is World News Tonight on Radio 660, as we continue to cover the details of what has been a very disturbing and terrifying night. It has been approximately 1 hour since Pope John Paul II was killed in a suicide bombing in the Philippines, the opening strike in what has felt like a long night of terror, but in reality it has been merely an hour. Out of respect of the victims, we would like to ask at this time that you all join us in observing a moment of silence for Pope John Paul II, as well as the other hundreds, possibly thousands, of lives lost tonight in a series of senseless acts of violence.